There, of course, is increasing talk about how and when the lockdown could be eased. We'll be talking to the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, about the government plans later. But first, we can go to Devon, where we can hear from a medical expert, the former Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Gina Radford, who, since leaving that role last year, has become a vicar. Now, of course, we all know that really the only long-term way out of the lockdown is a vaccine or effective treatment. How optimistic are you that that can be found, and how long do you think it could take?
Well, I think we need to be quite realistic about this. Firstly, we haven't at the moment got a vaccine, so we're having to start from scratch. We don't have a hugely good track record with vaccines for this particular virus, coronavirus, the family of viruses. But having said that, everything is being thrown at it. There are researchers all over the world trying to identify vaccines. So we've never seen anything like the effort that's being put to discover this vaccine. But even if we begin, as we have, to identify things that might possibly work, vaccines that have potential, then there's also the huge process of testing for firstly, whether they are effective, but also whether they're safe. Because there's no point developing a vaccine that actually is then going to cause more harm than it's trying to prevent. So, I think those who are very used to the process of developing vaccine are saying that they're not anticipating this being available until well into next year. But having said that, we're the government's fast tracking some testing, for example, from Oxford. So you never know if that is successful. Maybe it'll be with us sooner, but then of course we've got to manufacture it to, in the millions capacity.
Certainly not a quick process then, as you say. Now, I'm keen to ask your opinion on a report in the Mail on Sunday today as well, saying that some British scientists have developed these new immunity tests that the ministers have ordered 50 million of, that could be ready in June. These are the tests that would effectively show whether you've already had COVID-19 and if you've developed immunity. Do you think that sounds realistic?
Well, there are tests already available, and one of the issues is not whether, not that there aren't tests available, it's actually how accurate they are. And so Public Health England have already been testing some and what we call antibody tests. And unfortunately, quality control measures are not such that they are reliable. So whether this test is more reliable, we will have to see. But the other issue, we need to put this whole question of immunity in a little bit of perspective. We don't yet have strong evidence, that if you've had coronavirus, this particular strain, you are immune to getting it again. So we don't know, what levels of antibody response are required and how long the antibodies stay in the body. So we really don't know a lot about what it means if we do find antibodies in people, how long that's going to last. So that's why the government have set up another research programme to monitor a large number of people over a long time to see what happens to the antibodies in their body.
It seems like a pretty critical missing jigsaw piece, that. And certainly, listening to what you say, it does feel as if the lockdown or some measures of social distancing will be here for a long time to come. Now, of course, I know that what measures to ease and when is a political decision. But would you be able to shed any light on the kind of things that the government is likely to be weighing up?
Well, firstly, whatever happens, I anticipate that the lockdown will be lifted in stages. It's not going to be suddenly everyone's back to normal. And I think the message is getting through to people that for many of us, we're in this for the longer term. But they'll be looking at, firstly, what's actually going on in the rest of Europe and the rest of the world, who are ahead of us in terms of the epidemic curve. And we've seen, for example, that what tends to happen is things like small businesses being opened first, if they can safely socially distance. Social distancing is the key. So whether we would look at different types of business, maybe also different parts of the country, and also things like schools, whether we can let children go back, but in a very safe way. So maybe reducing the numbers in a class, maybe having some classes going back 1 week, another class going back another week, and their schooling being supplemented by the continuing of online classes. So I think that the key message is that whatever happens, this is going to be a staged process.
It's certainly, as you say, be really important to look at other countries and learn from the lessons that we see there. If you do look around the world, you can see that certain countries seem to have done, frankly, much better, I guess, in the UK in being prepared for a pandemic such as the one we're seeing. Perhaps countries like South Korea, for example, who have experienced these respiratory pandemics before. But at the same time, we've seen what's happened with MERS and SARS, even if we didn't experience them so much in the United Kingdom. Why was it that we weren't better prepared for this? Why didn't we stockpile more PPE? Why don't we invest in capacity for more testing? Why didn't we lock down earlier? What's the answer?
The answer is that all these things are a balance, aren't they? Because if you stockpile masses and masses of PPE, firstly, everything has an expiry date, let's be quite clear. And also you need the capacity to actually store this. And you then need the logistics underpinning that. That means that you can then deliver it. And we know at the beginning of this pandemic, there were some issues with actually even delivering the stockpiles that we did have. The other issue is the difference with this particular pandemic is not so much that it is a pandemic, as awful as that is, but it's actually the deadliness of this virus. So the other sort of pandemics that we tend to be used to in this country, like flu, etc., it has not been as deadly as this one. And that is why it has caused such an appropriately strong response from countries globally and put us into lockdown. So I think, to summarise, we usually, we do have a strong track record of being prepared for pandemics, but this is a pandemic of a completely different wave.
Now, just finally, while we've got you, you're now a vicar, pretty big career change from Deputy Chief Medical Officer. During lockdown, we've seen Christians celebrate Easter, Muslims, Ramadan. How difficult is it for people of faith to acknowledge these festivals in really difficult times of social distancing? What would your message be to them?
I think the most important thing is to remember that, at the end of the day, our faith is central to who we are, and we celebrate and worship together in whatever way we do. But we can now, through the wonders and innovative and creative ways that we are finding, worship and celebrate perhaps through the means of technology or the phone, or different ways that all of us have a personal faith as well as a communal faith. And the most important in all of this, and all our faiths would say this, is that we have a responsibility for each other. We have a responsibility to ensure that our own actions don't put others at risk. But certainly in my own parish, it's just been wonderful to see the really creative and innovative ways we've had of worshipping. We have Zoom services, we have telephone services, we have Zoom coffee mornings. We come together still as a community. And also the other important thing is the pastoral side. So people of all faith are coming together to show that support to the wider community in very, very practical ways, whether it be through food banks, through helping with distribution of food parcels and medicines. We all, as people of faith, have a role to play in that.